G'day, Whitey. How you going? It's always a bit of a strange week this week, I always find. I personally enjoy it. The first week of no footy, no AFL men's footy, that is for 24, 25 weeks. But I've got a lot of mates that hate it, and I understand why. They just want to get stuck straight into it. So it's a bit of a strange week, but still plenty to talk about.
Absolutely. Now, before we get on to your All-Australian observations, one on Petrarca, was he rated in the competition before he got injured?
He was the fourth best player in the game when he got injured. So
he's been top 5 for the last 3 years.
He's been around about that top 10. He's been inside the top 10 more often than not since 2021. Since he made that move into a permanent midfield role. So yeah, as I said, fourth best player in the game. Bont, Heaney, and someone else. I can't remember who was the third. Might have been Houston was the third best player in the game. Outside of Christian, so no doubt he was a huge loss for Melbourne, and you can understand why the temper text in front of us is going bananas in terms of what Melbourne should only be considering should they be looking at potentially moving him on.
We need the SEN technical team to come down and fix the machine that's blowing up. Okay, let's get straight into the All-Australian team and your observations. What we're going to do tonight is actually do a quick summary on all the teams that missed out on the finals, why they did, and perhaps what they need to go and get when it comes to a trade situation to improve them for next year. But Brad Johnson's done his rolling All-Australian team all year on Sports Day, and he's had a crack at it. Everyone in here's had a crack at it at some point. What were your thoughts when we've had a look at the squad?
Well, I think the temper text has gone off with Petrarca, and I think it's going to go off very shortly post putting up our All-Australian team from 2024. So we did this, I can't remember how long we did this, Whitey, maybe 8 weeks ago, halfway stage of the season. So this is purely off ours.
So this is your team?
Yeah, we're not looking at the All-Australian squad. This is purely off our rating system and selecting our team based off this rating system. So absolutely nothing to do with the All-Australian squad. That was announced whenever that was,
Monday,
yesterday or whatever it was. So if we work our way from back to forward, so we'll start
from the back line.
So from the back line, Nick Blakey, Sam Collins, Dan Houston.
Yeah.
The centre half back line, Jack Sinclair, Jeremy McGovern, Bailey Dale.
Yeah.
The wing line, Errol Goulden on one wing, Paddy Cripps in the centre, Massimo D'Ambrosio on the other wing.
Yeah.
The half forward line, Hayden Young, Aaron Norton at centre half forward.
Yeah.
Harry Sheasel across half forward.
Yep.
Full forward line, Brent Daniels in one forward pocket, Jesse Hogan at full forward, Tyson Stengel in the other forward pocket. The ruck line, Max Gawn, Marcus Bontempelli, Isaac Heaney.
Yeah.
And the bench, we've picked a team of 23 like you do in the AFL system.
Is that what they're going to do?
Not sure. I'll ask
It's a very good question, isn't it?
We've just picked 23 like the All-Australian team changed from 21 to 22 and that changed. We're going 23. So Zach Butters, Sam Flanders,
yes,
Max Holmes, Dylan Moore, and Caleb Sarong.
Okay.
So the two biggest omissions and the temper text will go bananas.
I don't already know what one of them is.
Where is Nick Dacos?
Oh, yes.
And where is Chad Warner? And this is an easy get out, and I'll get this out. They are literally the next two players to come into the team. So they would be the next two off the rank. The next three defenders that would come into the team would be Wangani Malera, Dane Zorko, and James Sicily. The next three forwards to come into the team, Ed Richards, Sam Swikowski, and Charlie Curnow. And the next ruck to come into the team would be Tristan Cherry.
Right.
So I'll leave the Dacos discussion until we get into the Collingwood quick season snapshot. So I won't get into that just yet.
I've got one question for you.
Fire away.
Where's Zach Merritt?
So Zach Merritt, we've had this discussion all year with Zach. So Zach finished the year really strongly. He came inside the top 50 players in the competition, and that's now 9 years in a row he's been inside the top 55, 60 players across the competition. But the reality is that up against all those midfielders, Butters, Sarong, Warner and Dacos are still ahead of him as well. He's fallen just short. He's had a fantastic season, but he's up against quality in there. And I think at times, I totally get it and totally appreciate the leadership side of things, and I think it stands out really in the Essendon team as well. And I think what he does probably stands out more. With Essendon, in all due respect, given that the lack of absolute superstars around him.
I think that's a fair call.
A lot of these guys have, so Sarong has Hayden Young next to him. Warner has Heaney next to him. Dacos, is probably doing it by himself, at times as well. So that's probably, the reason as to why he wasn't in there.
And the other one that has got a lot of traction on the Tepper text, not just now, but throughout the course of the last 24 hours, the Rowan Marshall discussion as to why he wasn't in the squad. Where do his numbers stack up against, say, a Cherry?
No, I can totally understand why he's not in the squad. He had a very good year, finished inside the top 100 players in the competition, but he wasn't. His finish to the year was superb. Love the fact that he pushed forward and was able to impact the scoreboard as the season went on. But you got to remember, it is a 24-week campaign. So, you look at what he's done across the whole season. It's been a very good season. But comparing him to what Gawn and Cherry have done in particular, there's a little bit off.
And the hard part too is with a Marshall, it's a little bit like a wicketkeeper in a cricket team. You can only have one.
Yeah, you can only pick one.
And so you can't go and put Marshall in a forward pocket or in a back pocket just to get him in the team, like you can potentially do with a midfielder on a half-forward flank.
Yeah.
All right, let's just go through the score before we get to a quick end-of-season summary on each player, and we'll try and feed some temper texts through as they come.
Sure, they're coming in.
It's a lot of the ones that aren't there as opposed to that are there.
Told you they were coming in, Whitey.
The list is as follows. From the back line, Blakey, Collins, Houston, Sinclair, McGovern, Dale, Goulden, Cripps, D'Ambrosio, Young, Norton, Sheasel, Daniels, Hogan, Stengel, Gawn, the ruck, Bontempelli and Heaney, the on-ballers. And then the bench, Butters, Flanders, Holmes, Moore and Sarong. So just feeding through the temper text, Waitering not being there has surprised a few, and Andrews and Neil, a couple of others that have surprised outside of the obvious with Nick Dacos.
Yeah, so I think Lockie's season's been a really good one, and again he rates around about that top 50 players in the competition. Where again, I think people look at it and you go, geez, if you're a top 50 player, don't you rate him? It's like, no, he's a top 50 player across the competition. You're an unbelievable player, but the consistency at times from Lockie, he has been tagged a little bit and been quiet at times, and he's he's had patches this year where he's been absolutely phenomenal as well. But in terms of just the overall consistency from start to finish, just a little bit short compared to some of those other midfielders that have worked their way into the team.
All right, we'll continue to feed the messages through on the Tepper text as we go. But before we get to Collingwood, who are the first team that we will look at because they finished 9th, breaking news coming from West Coast. The West Coast Eagles can confirm, or are confirming, that key defender Tom Barrass has today informed the club of his request for a trade. So he's still got 2 years left on a contract. He has requested a trade, and during that exit meeting, he has nominated Hawthorn as his preferred destination. So that is coming from the West Coast Eagles. Tom Barrass, it's no surprise, requesting a trade a year after almost going to Sydney, but he's now saying he wants to go to Hawthorn.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they get that deal done. The Hawks, I'm sure that they will, and it just adds again to their list of players that they've been able to acquire elsewhere. It hasn't just been purely a rebuild through the draft, which we'll get into Richmond a little bit later on. It's going to be interesting to see. I did like what Kingy raised about Tom Barrass a couple of weeks ago. That be interesting to see how he goes without Jeremy McGovern.
Yes.
In my opinion, the game's best defender that we've seen in 15 years, that he's played alongside and protects and helps out better than any other key defender we've seen in that period. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch.
No doubt about that. Okay, let's get to Collingwood. They're the first team that missed the finals. Just your champion data, quick end of season summary on the Magpies.
Yeah, so the Pies, so their point of difference this year, their forward 50 despite having numerous injuries at times, still functioned the third best of any team in the competition. Their ability to to pressure the opposition, create forward half stoppage, create forward half turnover, and then score off the back of that was top 4 in the competition, and their overall pressure game was top 6 in the competition. So that was the reason why they got so close to to featuring in September this year. The stuff that actually fell apart this year, which was sort of probably the most surprising, was their ball movement. We didn't really see that ballistic, damaging, threatening ball movement that really won them a flag last year. If you think back to what they were able to do across that half-back line, there was no more dominant team that was seen in the competition for a number of years and been able to explode and score off the back of that. We didn't really see that. And then we didn't really see them defend opposition ball movement across their own sort of halfback area as well as what they did last year. The Nick Dacos discussion. This is where I want to get to. So again, he only just missed out the team. So just back off a little bit.
As my grandmother would say, hold your horses.
But I just wonder if you're a Collingwood supporter, this is he's going to be the reason as to why you can challenge, I think, next year for a prelim or not. And do you want ball winning Nick or do you want ball user Nick? And I think if you look at his breakdown this year, first 8 weeks of the year, he was ball user Nick. He was flying. He was top 6 for ball use and impact with ball use. His ball winning was top 20, but the point of difference that he was his ball use. And then through injury, to Dugowie not being able to do what he did last year, to Tom Mitchell not featuring at all, he really had to become their contest and clearance player. So then for that next 3 to 4 month period, his impact from a ball winning sense was top 5 in the competition. But the ball use sat almost at that 100th mark in the competition. We didn't see that damage that we've seen with Nick for 2.5 years. And then his last 2 games of the year, he gets back to being ball user Nick again. So I think the inclusion of Mitchell next year and a fit Jordan Dugowie to allow ball user Nick to be at play more than ball winner Nick will be the deciding factor in terms of what Collingwood can actually do in 2025.
So will he, in your view, stay in the midfield? Would he go back to halfback?
No, he's not going back to halfback. He's a midfield forward for the rest of his career. I think it might, it's just getting others around him to be able to help out. Yep. So he's winning 35% of his possessions contested, not 50-50. You want to. I think if you're an opposition coach, you're looking at Nick going, well, I don't want you on the outside, because when you get ball in hand, what you do is you're in rare air in that aspect of the game.
All right, let's move on to Fremantle.
Yeah, so the
greatest. It might be one of the greatest chokes in recent times to miss the finals from their position.
Yeah, and you do feel a little bit sorry for them at the end of the year where they lost Tracy, they lost Pearce, and they lost Darcy. So you've lost your key forward, your key back, and your ruckman at times. But to lose your final 4 games of the year and to miss was probably a little bit sort of unbelievable, really. If you had to put that on the agenda 4 weeks ago, their ability to punish the opposition this year far better. Number 4 in the competition, they were bottom 3 last year. Their raw clearance game was the best clearance game in the competition, and their contest work around stoppage was top 4. That was their going to be their point of difference. That clearance game dropped away the last 4 or 5 weeks of the year. We talked about this during the year with Freo. They had to put it on watch. That their raw points against sort of figure looked really good, and it was like top 2, top 3. It's a little bit false because they sort of control the game a lot through their possession. It can protect their defence. So when you're looking at how often do you concede a score when the opposition win possession, that's not false. That's real, and that's going to expose it. So throughout the whole year, they were about mid-table in terms of in terms of if they were able to defend that. So in raw terms, what that meant, if they didn't get that control game going, their defence was vulnerable. They really couldn't get that control game going as much as what they would have hoped in the last 3 to 4 weeks of the year. And yes, Pearce wasn't there, but their defence became a little bit more sort of exposed as a result of that. So, yes, disappointing finish to the year. Yes, they've missed finals. But in terms of where this group is at, so the relative ratings is a good indication of sort of youth coming through. So looking at how far above or below expectation you're performing. We're only looking at the 23-year-olds here that played half a season. They've got 5 players that were performing above expectation this year. That's a fantastic launching pad heading into 2025 and beyond. Really keen to see what Alex Pearce and Brennan Cox can do as a pairing. Probably only saw them once or twice this year as a pairing. But then more so, will they actually sort of release the shackles and sort of just allow this defensive group and back them in to defend and to defend for yourself? We saw Geelong do this and release it at the end of 21. We're going to back it in. We're going to sort of release what we can do offensively, and the results were there. What can Fremantle do next year moving forward is going to be interesting to see.
And it'll be interesting even, I mean, this isn't a statistical thing, just the mental scarring from that end of season, whether it does have an impact or whether it actually galvanises them and makes them stronger for next year. I think there'll be a fascinating watch. Okay, let's move on to Melbourne.
So the positives for the they are. So the positives for the D's, again, they were the number one D50 team in the competition. They're without the footy profile, was the third best in the competition. So defence was their strong suit. Their ability to be able to impact the scoreboard offensively and then restrict defensively ranked top 4 in the competition. So that was their strength. The concern, again, is what they were able to do with the footy. So turning possession into score. Only Richmond, West Coast and North struggled to do that more than what Melbourne did. Their contest work for the first time in years dropped to number 12. They've constantly been either first or second for the previous 3 or 4 years. And then their territory, they've always been get the footy in, lock it in your forward half. Their territorial work dropped to 15th in the competition. We talked at times during the year their want to actually explore a different ball movement method to start the year, and you'll never knock a team for trying to get better and trying to work it out. They tried, didn't really work. They tried to go back to what they've been. That worked at times, but didn't work at times. So it was a bit clunky. But if you look similar to Freo, you look at the under 23-year-olds this year. Again, like Freo, five under 23-year-olds performed above expectation. So it's a really good launching pack. I think that the way that they've drafted and recruited over a number of years now has been quite strong. Clearly, Rivers going into the midfield was a tick. Like the experiment of McPhee going into the midfield, I'm not going with that though next year. I think small sample size, only looking at him from a couple of games, didn't seem to have the immediate impact that like a Trent Rivers did, whereas I think he has more impact and he's able to assist their ball movement game across half-back. So it's going to be clearly a fascinating off-season for Melbourne, but then it's going to be interesting to see what sort of method they try and come up with in 2024. We told you that they try to change and try to actually experiment. What do they do in 2025? So
based on what the numbers are telling you, do you think it is more a midfield issue or a forward issue, that scoring from possession?
No, I think it's more of a ball movement issue.
Okay. So method rather than personnel.
Yeah, my firm belief is, and we talked about this, it might have been last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember when it was, that when you've got your midfield set and your midfield's rock solid from a clearance and contest perspective, behind the footy is set, and then you're able to move the footy and you'll be able to generate ball movement off that, you will find ways to score. Right? So their defense is set, their contest is set, their ball movement's not set. So you look at Collingwood last year, and in all due respect to what Collingwood had in their forward 50, it was off what the midfield did and what the defence did, and then their ball movement game. It was just electric, and you find ways to score off the back of that. I think Melbourne, to me, that's the most important aspect, not to get so consumed with the individuals ahead of the ball, get more concerned about what you're actually doing from a ball movement method, and I think the scoreboard returns will come.
All right, let's head on to West Coast. Again, just repeating the news coming out of the Eagles tonight. Tom Barrass, in his exit interview, has said he wants a trade and he wants to be traded to Hawthorn.
So we have a look at West Coast, and we're only just going to compare West Coast against themselves, right? Which is, I think, given how horrendous their profile was in 2023, that's probably the more realistic, sort of perspective. So if you're a West Coast supporter, you improved on the scoreboard by 4 goals this year. So offensively, you improved by 8 points, and defensively, you improved by close to 16 points. So you have improved by 4 goals. Your contest work went from minus 18 a game last year to minus 9. So minus 9 is still a poor number, but again, comparing yourself to yourself, that was an improvement. And then your territory work went from minus 16 inside 50s a game last year to minus 8. Again, minus 8, still not a great number, But comparing yourself to yourself, you've improved significantly on that. So that's, I think, if you're the new coach coming in with West Coast, I think that's you slowly just got to look at little wins. I remember Brisbane and Fags' first year, they've gone from conceding 130 points to 114 points. And 114 points are still 17th or 18th, but you've improved by 3 goals. It's a start.
Yep.
Similar to this, it's a start. Then you go to the negative. Take the negative as 18th with the footy, 17th without the footy, and then ball movement both ways, bottom 2. So clearly they've got a lot of work to do in terms of overall team performance. And unfortunately, we just mentioned Fremantle and Melbourne. So they've only got one player. Well, they only had one player in 2024 under the age of 23 that performed above average or above expectation. That was Harley Reid, who performed well above expectation. So, Matty Clark and the job that he's got in front of him from a list management and recruiting point of view, it is a significant challenge with what they've got. They haven't got the absolute youngsters coming through where you can bank on that. Going, okay, yes, we've got Harley, but we've also got A, B, C, and D as a launching pad.
Yep.
It's not really there at the moment. It might, that might change, and we might sit here next year and go, geez, so-and-so's come on, so-and-so's come on. But from what we've seen so far, this job from a list management perspective is probably the most challenging job in the industry at the moment.
I know we're saying this about all clubs, but it'll be fascinating to see what they do and how quickly they get the new coach in there to set a new direction, potentially before a trade period, or certainly that'll happen before a draft, because you kind of feel like got to get on with it as quickly as possible for the reasons you're mentioning. And
I think, if you're West Coast, I think I wouldn't be too consumed about the Barras move. Yes, it's, you're losing a good player, but, you've got to start to get some significant draft picks and some significant draft hauls in. So I think starting with that from the starting point is going to be important. But what else do they do? I mean, you look at sort of their list and what they could offer up to get a draft haul potentially like Richmond are going to get this year. And it's hard to actually work out. They haven't got the Rioli or Baker or Bolton sort of offerings like Richmond do to get that immediate draft haul in to actually boost. So it'd be fascinating to see what Matty Clark and his team does in the off season.
All right, before the break, just quickly, guess who?
Yeah, so guess who? So this is a team guess who. So this is a bottom 10 theme at the moment. So without the footy, so this is the stuff that me and myself and Kingy have tracked for a number of years. So without the footy, who had the third best without the footy profile this year? So that's taken into account how often you restrict opposition ball movement, how well you defend your defensive 50, how well you win the ball back off the opposition between the midfield zones, and then how often you deny the opposition turning a possession into a score. So this team was number 3 across the season, and they've missed finals. I think it might be a bit of a surprise at time. We always try and have a bit of a surprise.
Absolutely.
Guess who, don't we, Whitey?
So number 3 on the list of all teams, but coming from the bottom 10 that aren't playing finals.
So it's coming from the bottom 10. So without the footy, the Dogs are number 1, Geelong were number 2.
Who was number 3?
This team was number 3. So they have the third best without the footy profile of any team this season. They're a bottom 10 team. Who was it?
Well, we had about 568,326 temper texts that said St Kilda. I'm not sure it is St Kilda.
No, it's not St Kilda. It's not St Kilda. I'll give it to you.
Yep, go for it.
Gold Coast.
Gold Coast.
The Gold Coast. So that's a great launching pad under Damien Hardwick's first season to head into for 2025. So the second best D50 in the competition. Their ability to be able to win the ball back off the opposition in the midfield zone was the second best of any team in the comp. Their ball movement game themselves actually came to top 4 in the comp, so that actually got better as the season went on, and their ability to be able to punish the opposition off turnover was top 3 in the comp. So they have a significant foundation where I don't think they've had that foundation before heading into an off season. So I understand that there's a lot of negativity around Gold Coast and their away record and disappointment and letting teams down and letting people down, but I think this is a different team to what we've seen end of season before. The room for improvement is obvious. So their ability to be able to connect going inside 50, bottom 2 in the competition. So 7/8 in the comp. Only North Melbourne were worse in the competition. Their midfield didn't really capitalise from a damage perspective this year. So they were bottom 4 in terms of being able to turn clearances into scores. this season. So they do have a little bit of work to do on top of the positivity that was there from their 2024 campaign. And we look to their under 23-year-olds. This is where you're a goal and just hold the line as an industry. 8 players under the age of 23 performed above expectation this year. Sam Flanders almost worked his way into the top 10 players in the competition. He's moved into the forward half of the ground to end the season. I'm interested to see what Hardwick does with that.
He pretty much played in every
he did.
part of the ground just last week.
Started down back, became a permanent midfielder, ended the last 4 weeks of the year almost being a permanent forward. So they have a lot to work with heading into 2025. So hold the line if you're a Gold Coast supporter.
Well, how much will Dan Rioli help?
Significant. Massive. Huge. Like you're talking a top 50 player in the competition wants to go to your footy club. Massive addition. So exactly what they need, exactly what will help them moving forward.
All right, Prabs, congratulations. You did say Gold Coast. There was one other that said Gold Coast. And as I said, we had lots of messages. Not too many were with the Suns third in the rankings. Let's go to North Melbourne now, Hoyne.
So North, so their contest work as the season went on. So the back end of the year, they were top 6 contest team in the across the second half of 2024. Their clearance work in that period became a mid-table clearance team this year, and their accuracy, it just must be a Clarko thing. It's just, their accuracy was number 1 in the competition this year. Think back to Clarko's days of Hawthorn, they're always top 2, top 3 in that regard. The unfortunate thing is, and I don't want to be too harsh with this if you're a North supporter, but outside of their accuracy, their profile was horrendous and actually didn't improve.
I was going to ask you that. Has it gone backwards?
No, so they were the worst team in the competition without the footy. So we've got 4 areas to measure without the footy. They were 18th in all 4. We've got 4 areas to measure in terms of what you do with the footy, accuracy being one of them. The other 3 areas, they were 18th without the footy. Their raw points from clearance differential on the scoreboard, 18th, and their work in general play contest, 18th. It was a horrific profile, and unfortunately, there's no way to sugarcoat what that profile was. So, in terms of had they improved this year on last year, on that profile, no. I was talking to a North supporter about this yesterday, and he was a bit sort of frustrated and down the dumps. So when are we actually going to get out of this? So it's going to be interesting moving forward. They did have 5 players under the age of 23 that performed above expectation this year, so there is a little bit of that you can hang your hat up to. Clearly, Harry Sheasel is the absolute number 1 thing that you're hanging your hat on to in terms of what can happen moving forward. But there's a lot of work clearly that needs to be done with this North Melbourne profile.
All right, the Adelaide Crows. There was a bit of hype about the Crows, but they missed the finals again under Matthew Nicks.
So their ability to defend ball movement was top 3 in the competition. Their pressure game was top 4 in the competition. And when they got rid of trying to be that marking, high possession, sort of, control the game team, that's when they actually looked at their best. They had that period there for 4 or 5 weeks during the year where they were taking 100+ marks, but the ball's going nowhere. So, when they dropped that and it became a more chaotic-based team, that's when they did look at their best like they did in 2023. From an improvement lens heading into next year, their ability to turn possession into score was bottom 6. So, offensively, it really wasn't there. And a lot of that was off the back of their ball movement. So, they were a bottom 4 team at being able to move the ball themselves. So, in terms of what they can do, from an individual perspective and sort of generating a little bit of personnel behind there to get a bit of excitement into that. Mitch Hinge probably was that player, but needs a little bit more behind there. Clearly ranking, they found, that midfield centre forward player. Dawson became that player. Matt Crouch probably had a better year than he has had for a long time in terms of impact, with that. But how they're able to generate that ball movement from behind centre is going to be something that I'll be interested to see what Matty Nicks does. 4 players under the age of 23 this year performed above expectations, so they do have a little bit there to work with, and that didn't include Riley Tilthorpe.
Okay.
So Tilthorpe's the one I think that we saw in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks of the year where you looked at, okay, Tex is coming to the end here, but you look at what life looks like after Walker and the impact that he's had on this footy club now for a number of years. this guy looked like being the one to take over this forward 50 and really ensure that this forward 50 maintains at a level where it is going to be dominant moving forward.
Yes, he certainly did give them something to get excited about moving forward, Riley Thilthorpe. Okay, what about Essendon? We talked before about Fremantle's big choke towards the end of the year. You could probably put Essendon into that category as well.
I think, and I'll get into the areas of improvement, but the way in which they wanted to defend this year, I think, is a far better model than what it was in 2023, where they were more of a retreating defence. We'll concede the entries, but we'll defend in our D50. They were more aggressive, wanting to push up and be a high press, high territory-based team. So their ability to be able to win the ball back in the midfield zone was number 3 in the comp. Last year, it was bottom 3. So yes, their overall defensive profile wasn't great, but they defended in a more sustainable way by being more aggressive. Their ability to be able to win contest in general play was top 6 in the competition. And then as a result of sort of being able to win those general play contests and defending more aggressively, their territory numbers improved considerably on the back of what 2023 was. Then you go to the areas of improvement for next year. Clearly, Essendon supporters were frustrated with their lack of connection going inside 50. So like Gold Coast, getting a lot of entries, but bottom 3 for turning those entries into scores. As a result of being more aggressive with how they defended or wanted to defend the opposition, their D50 got exposed more than what it was, or more than what it did last year. They became the 4th easiest team to score against once they actually got inside 50. And again, their inability to consistently defend opposition ball movement was bottom 5 in the competition. So they do have a lot there to actually work with and improve on for next year. Unlike a few of these other teams that we've sort of spoken about, they don't have the glut of under 23-year-olds coming through where you can really hang your hat on. Well, clearly Caddy's going to be one of those, but who else outside of that is next in line?
Well, the evidence of that is that their 2 first-round picks before Caddy, so Sardis and Hobbs spent a lot of the year in the twos.
In the VFL, yeah. And then I'm just really interested in this guy, Nick Martin, and where this magnet goes.
Very interesting.
In 2025. So 2023, he's rated inside the top 30 players in the competition. 2024, he rates inside the top 50 players in the competition. So individually, he has had 2 fantastic seasons, but it hasn't led to any sort of real, team level performance. So you look at the connection piece going inside 50, and you look at the class or lack of class outside of merit that they have in the midfield group. Could this guy become, more of a, an inside midfielder type that he's not going to win contested possession, but to be around the contest to get the first or second receive, to get that connection going inside 50 at a greater level than what it was this year? Because I look at it outside of merit. What Durham and Caldwell produced this year, it was their effort. You can't question their effort, and what they did as a midfield pairing was solid. But is it actually going to go to the next level to take Essendon to the next level? You need a Durham or a Caldwell in your midfield, but where's the absolute class in that? Martin could be that one. I'm interested to see what he does in 2025.
Yes, that game breaker type of midfielder. We've got 2 to go. St Kilda and Richmond. We'll start, Hoyne, with the Saints.
Yeah, so the Saints have been on this for the majority of the season. Their ball movement was not the issue, despite everyone thinking it was the issue. So no one scored more out of their back half this year than what St Kilda did. Their overall turnover game, which is number 1 indicator in the game, was top 7 in the competitions. That's a pretty reasonable rank given that, for where they actually finished. And their connection going inside 50 to end the year for the last 6 games, was ranking top 6 in the competition. So they look far more dangerous going inside 50. The area for improvement that forward 50 connection was not the case for the first 3-4 months of the year, and was largely the reason as to why they had such a poor win-loss record. Their inability to really hurt you and have any damage in their clearance game, was a significant, concern. So that was bottom 4 in the competition. And then just to start the year, so if you're a St Kilda supporter, take your way back to the start of the year. Your first 6 losses after round 9, 4 of them were by under 2 goals.
Yeah.
Like it was a harsh. Like you win 2 of those, you get to that stage of the year and you're actually 6-3, 5-4. So it can turn quite quickly. Luckily for the Saints, or sort of more exciting for the Saints heading forward, 4 players under the age of 23 performed above expectation this year. The interesting thing is moving forward in 2025. So Jack Sinclair, top 10 player in the competition. Wanganeen Malira, top 25 player in the competition. Then there's a significant gap in absolute star factor talent. So they had 5 players between the 75 to 100 mark. So really good footballers, but are any of them, or are these under 23-year-olds going to be able to elevate themselves into the top 50 to 70 players in the competition to allow St Kilda to move up the ladder and to challenge for a top 6, top 4 position? That's that's going to be the interesting watch for the Saints moving forward.
The game breakers forward of centre. Richmond to finish things off.
Yeah, so the positive for the Tigers is more sort of 2 individuals. So Ben Miller establishing himself as a key defender and a key defender if you're a Richmond supporter that you probably lock away for the next 4 to 5 years, hopefully alongside Noah Bolter. Hopefully Noah Bolter becomes the absolute lock key defender as opposed to swinging him forward and back. And then Ryan Mansell had a really had a really consistent season this year to actually finish himself inside the top 100 players in the competition. So the areas of concern, areas for improvement, clearly injury. You're not going to be able to have any sort of impact when you have when you have an injury profile that they did this year. Them and Carlton, clearly the numbers, number 1 and number 2 teams affected by injury, but unlike Carlton, they don't have the depth, Richmond, to be able to sort of cover that at times. 17th with the footy, 16th without the footy, and their clearance work was bottom 2 in the competition. One of the worst centre bounce seasons that we've seen. So how do they actually revamp this? How can they get Hopper, probably more than Taranto, how do they get Hopper going more, to be able to sort of impact contest and clearance work? They've got him for the next 4 or 5 years. So that's going to be significant in there. Unfortunately for the Richmond supporters, they did not have one player under the age of 23 who performed above expectation this year. So they're going to have to go to the draft. They're going to have a significant draft haul this year, but don't just rely purely on the draft. If you're relying purely on the draft, it is going to be a 6-7 year sort of waiting time to challenge for a finals berth. Hawthorn did not do that. Hawthorn, they cut it hard. The industry went bananas. We've now seen what they did. But as I keep saying, close to a third or more than a third of Hawthorn's team, week after week, has come through acquisitions made at the trade table.
Exactly right.
Not through the draft. So you're gonna have to get the mix right. Otherwise, it is going to be Otherwise, it is going to be a long year.
It's a bit of a money ball thing with Hawthorn, where they specifically went out for players that sometimes picked up 3rd round draft pick in exchange, but players that they clearly wanted for particular roles.
So a third of that team plays every week that's come from other teams. Not once did they give up a top 20 selection for any of those individuals. So that's why they are in a position where they are at the moment, the Hawks.